Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to today's The Hindu News Analysis. In today's news analysis, we'll be discussing about 8 important articles which are there in the Hindu newspaper today. Coming to the first page, the headlines: Air travel resumes but many seats on the 532 flights go empty. Also, 39,000 passengers ferried, last minute's cancellation leave many frustrated. And coming to the second article, testing up in states seeing massive return of migrants. So, as we all know, migrant workers are being returning to the states, and the states are being ramping up their test to find out the COVID-19 cases. So, here in this map, you can see the rate of testing in different states. For example, if you consider Maharashtra, the public labs are 40, private labs are 31. And coming to Andhra, Tamil Nadu, the public labs are 38 and the private labs are 28. So in this manner, the number of testing centers of the entire state is given up. And coming to the COVID related news, the country records 6,125 new cases and 151 deaths in the last 24 hours. So this the cases have been reduced compared to the previous 24 hour where more than 7,000 cases have been reported. Now, coming to the UPSC relevant article, deliberations on to end LAC tensions. So, deliberations are continuing on a daily basis between military commanders of India and China on the ground, in addition to other channels of communication to resolve the situation along the line of actual control. However, tensions continue at various places along the LAC, with both sides digging it with reinforcements, and a wait and watch situation was unfolding, the sources stated. The Greentop Hill above the Finger area of Pangong Tso Lake seems to be the latest friction point, with reports stating that 18 Indo-Tibetan Border Police, so ITBP is the force which is guarding the India-China border. Okay, here you have to go through other forces which are guarding the borders of other, border with other countries. For example, BSF guards with Pakistan and Bangladesh. Then there is ITBP which guards the border with China, and there is SSB which guards the border with Bhutan, Nepal, and also these kind of border forces you should be knowing clearly. So the other areas that continue to see major tensions in is the Galwan Nalla area with tensions at 2 to 3 points. Also, a road branching from 255 km Darbukshok Daulat Beg Oldi Road towards the Galwan Nala seems to be the reason for Chinese objection. So India is ramping up the infrastructure in these areas. So that is why Chinese is opposing to India's infrastructure construction in these areas, though it is in the Indian side of the border, because Chinese want only their infrastructure to be better, right? They don't want Indian infrastructure to be better in the border areas. So here you have to just know which all are the areas which are in tension between India and China as of now across the LAC. As we have already seen, one is the Pangong Tso Lake, then the other one is the Galwan Nala area, and the third one is in Sikkim, that is the Nakula Pass. So, and you should also know about the facts related to LAC. So LAC is the demarcation line which separates the areas controlled by India and China. Okay, and this line came into existence after the Indo-China War between in 1962. But the problem with this LAC is that it is not clearly demarcated. China has their own perceptions of LAC, and India has their own ideas of LAC. So this is the reason why friction is happening between India and China across the LAC. Now, coming to the main article of the day, this article comes under GS3 economy, and it is a critical review of the financial package announced by the government in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The present government's much hyped post COVID-19 relief and recovery package has disappointed many. Most estimates place the additional fiscal allocation implicit in the proposals at about a tenth of the size of the package, which the government claims amounts to around 10% of the GDP. Though the government says that it comes to around 10% of the GDP, the economists are telling that it is much less than that, because the reason being that it includes many packages which are being, many announcement by the RBI. So RBI's announcement, it comes under monetary policy, right? So it is included here. Also, the credit guarantees by the government are also included here. So credit guarantees means the banks are in case of credit guarantees, the banks are being forced to lend money, right? And only if the people, for example, MSMEs default, then only the government will be giving the money to the bank. So that is not an immediate expenditure, right? So the 10% of the GDP package, it consists of all these things, so it is considered to be actually much less than 10%. The government has heavily relied on measures aimed at pushing credit to banks, non-banking financial companies, and businesses, which are expected to use the borrowed funds to lend to others, make payments for falling due, compensate employees even under the lockdown, and otherwise spend even while not earning. So the trust is to get the Reserve Bank of India and other public financial institutions to infuse liquidity. Okay, so the government is not directly infusing liquidity, but using financial intermediaries to infuse liquidity, right? So what is this liquidity? Liquidity refers to ease of access to cash. A liquid asset is one that can be easily sold for or replaced with cash, and a liquid firm or agent is a holder of cash, a line providing access to cash, or an asset that can easily and quickly be converted to cash without significant loss of value. For example, I'll give you an example of liquid asset and a non-liquid asset. I mean, it's actually a measure, a degree of liquidity. Okay, so if consider the example of a bank saving and a land area which a person is owning, for example. So both are assets, right? So which is more liquid? Whether so land becomes less liquid in this case, because to get cash from land, you have to sell the land, okay, and get the cash, right? So it is a bit long and difficult process compared to withdrawing money from the bank savings. So which is a more liquid assets here? Bank savings is a more liquid asset compared to assets such as physical assets such as land, right? So that is the idea of I mean the concept of liquidity. Now, the government has also focused on NBFCs. The main intermediaries being enlisted for the task of transmitting liquidity are the banks, with NBFCs constituting the second tier. Among the first step taken by the RBI was to launch of special and targeted long-term repo operations, which allowed banks to access liquidity at repo rates to lend to specified clients. So here TLTRO becomes very important for prelims perspective. So in order to understand it in a simple manner, we'll break up into different parts. So here there is one term called repo operations, right? So LTR, I mean RO, will first focus on RO, that is repo operations. What is repo operations? The repo operations mean that the banks will be borrowing money from the RBI at a repo rate, right? This is repo operation, right? Now, why it is called as long-term repo operation, LTRO? LTRO because normal repo operations are for short term. For example, the maximum days are 28 days. Like banks will be giving money to the, I mean, banks will be borrowing money from the RBI for 28 days, and they have to give it back. They have to give the money back within 28 days. So repo operations are normally short term operations. But here, when we talk about LTROs are long term operations where the duration is extended to around 1 to 3 years. So that's why this is called LTRO, long term repo operations. Now, what is TLTRO? What does the T stands for? T stands for targeted. So why is it called targeted? Because the money borrowed by the banks is given to targeted customers. The money is not given to everyone, but they are given to targeted customers also. Now, coming to the case of India, in the first round of such operation, the first round of such TLTROs, the targeted customers were the big businesses. For example, they vary from Reliance, L&T, HDFC and all. Okay, so I hope you understood what it means. The idea of TLTRO is clear. Okay, now coming to the second round, the money was given to NBFCs, but the NBFCs balance sheet were already in crisis even before the COVID-19 crisis. For example, you might have heard of the issue of IL and FS crisis. Then there was this Franklin Templeton issue. I mean, Franklin Templeton is a mutual fund. When this COVID crisis came, they just had to wound up around 6 operations of mutual funds, right? So these issues were faced by the NBFCs earlier itself, right? So anyway, building on this initial liquidity infusion efforts, the COVID-19 package identified more intermediaries. So here we can see that the government is not directly giving money to the people, right? But the government is indirectly supporting the demand by giving money to the financial intermediaries. For example, they initially they supported the banks and NBFCs. Now they're supporting the organizations like SIDBI, NABARD, and National Housing Bank. So these are financial intermediaries. So government will support them, and they are supposed to extend more loans to the companies and all, right. So this is the pattern which is seen in the financial package announced by the government. So but the government will be giving full credit guarantees in case the clients defaulted. For example, if the MSMEs or some other clients default in their loans, the government has promised the banks that the government will take the full risk. 100% credit guarantee will be given. That is, the government will pay back 100% of the money which the bank is being losing. So that is the idea here. So these measures, which are only marginally effective in the best of the times, will not work during the crisis. So that is what the article is telling. Another component of the liquidity push is the measures that temporarily increase the disposable income of different sections. For example, it includes operations of provident fund, lower tax deduction at sources and all. But again, these efforts are very marginal in scope if it is relevant at all. So overall, the transmission of the supply side push from these monetary policy initiatives for relief and revival is bound to be weak. So the article is telling that these are supply side measures, right? For example, government is telling the bank to lend money to the supply side, that is the businesses, the MSMEs, the businesses like Reliance and all, right. So these are supply side efforts and not demand side efforts. Demand side efforts means that the personal disposable income of the people will increase. So when people get more money, that more money will be used to revive the economy. Given the circumstances, the liquidity push, even if partially successful, will only culminate in eventual defaults. Why eventual defaults? Because the government has already agreed for full credit guarantees, right? So the MSMEs and all, if they take the money, they don't have any incentive to pay back, because even if they don't pay back, the government will pay the money. Even the banks won't force the MSME to pay back, because the banks also know that anyway the government is has guaranteed 100% credit, so why should they bother, right? Anyway they are going to get money from the government. So that will be the attitude which is happening. So what is the way forward? What is needed now is government support in the form of new and additional transfers to people in cash and kind, and measures such as wage subsidy, equity support, and spending on employment programs. For example, employment programs like Narega should be increased, right? So what is the benefit of this? Narega and all are in demand side measures. That is, the people are directly getting the money. For example, the people will be working and the people are directly paid the wages. So the demand increases, the personal disposable income of the people increases, which will revive the demand and which will result in economic revival. So this demand side push is being supported by most of the economists as of now, instead of a supply side push which is being done by the government in their financial package. Also, in order to give this, the government have to uh, borrow money, right? So the government has to do debt financing, debt finance spending by the government with borrowing money at lower interest rate from central bank, or even a monetization of the deficit. So what is this monetization of deficit? It is an operation by the RBI where RBI will be printing currency. So RBI will be printing new currency in order to give money to the people, right? So what is the issue with this? Printing currency can result into inflation in the long term. So monetization of the deficit should be only a one time operation, and it should not be the norm, right? But at least at this point of time, when the people are in need of cash, the monetization of deficit can actually take place, right? So that is also a way forward. But what happens is that the present government seems to be very fiscally conservative, and they are not willing to spend money. So even though 10% of the GDP is being told, we know that it is mostly RBI operations, credit guarantees given, and also the 10% GDP given is not actually 10%, it is much less than that. So it shows the fiscal conservatism of the government. Also, the article criticizes the government, telling that the self-reliance package calls on citizens to rely on themselves, aided by uncertain offer of temporary access to credit. That path can only have devastating consequence for lives and livelihoods. So overall, this is a very critical article about the government financial package. Now coming to the second article, Karnataka takes efforts to solve mystery over the birthplace of Purandara Dasa. So this is important for prelims perspective, and under it comes under art and culture. So, who is Purandara Dasa? He is hailed as the Pitamaha of Carnatic music. So, he is hailed as a father figure of Carnatic music. Anyway, the Department of Archaeology, Heritage and Museum, they will soon commence field research work at Keshavapura in Agara Grama Panchayat of Tirthahalli Taluk in Karnataka. So, there are some confusion regarding the birthplace of Purandara Dasa. So it was widely believed that the mystic poet was born in Purandargarh in Maharashtra. However, many in Malnad in Karnataka claim that he hails from this region, that is Keshavapura in Agara Gram Panchayat. So in order to clear the confusions of his birthplace, the Karnataka government has taken efforts to find evidences of his birthplace, right? So, according to historians, Araga in Malnad was a bustling commercial center during the Vijayanagar rule, the period to which the poet belonged to. So, here what you have to focus is on the prelims related facts. So, here you got the second one prelims related fact was Purandara Dasa is hailed as the father of Carnatic music, right? And the second prelims related fact here is he was a contemporary of the Vijayanagar rule, right? So you can see that he might have lived in the 15th and the 16th century where the Vijayanagar rule was active. Also, he belonged to the Vaishnava tradition. So this can be another prelims related question. So just note this prelims related facts. Okay. Prior to his initiation into the Haridasa tradition, that is the Vaishnava tradition, Purandara Dasa was a rich merchant and was called as Srinivasa Nayaka. So here you can also see the term Nayaka. Nayakas are actually a title, right, which is attributed to locally influential people, including the wealthy merchants in the Malnad during the Vijayanagar rule. So you might have heard about Nayaka rulers also. Okay. So to solve the mystery regarding the birthplace, the state government has directed Kannada University of Hampi to form an expert committee. So after visiting Keshapura and surrounding places, the committee members said there was enough evidence to come to the conclusion that the devotional poet was actually born here. So about Purandara Dasa, you have to learn for prelims perspective. And there are some other facts also. You can go through Wikipedia for that. For example, he was a disciple of a person called Vyasa Tirtha. So Vyasa Tirtha is a person who belongs to the Dvaita tradition. You might have learned about various philosophies like Advaita, Dvaita, and all, right? So Dvaita is a philosophy which is created by Madhavacharya, right? So there's another person called Vyasa Tirtha who also follows the Dvaita tradition, and this Purandara Dasa, he is a disciple of this person called Vyasatirtha. Okay, so just go through the philosophies of Dvaita and all. So Dvaita says that the God and the individual souls are two separate things, right? So Brahman and the souls, these are two separate things. So the idea of Dvaita philosophy should be clear to you. Now coming to the next article, ILO urges Prime Minister not to dilute labor laws. So we might have seen that in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in order to seem industry friendly, many states like Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and all, they are trying to dilute the labor laws. So the International Labor Law has informed the trade unions of the India that its Director General has expressed concern and urged Prime Minister Narendra Modi to send a clear message to the central and state governments to uphold international labor laws after the recent dilution of laws by some state. So a group of 10 central trade unions of India, they wrote to the ILO, International Labour Organization in Geneva on May 14th, seeking its intervention to protect the workers' right and international labor standards. Okay. So which are these state trade unions? The trade unions which have sent the letter to the ILO are International Trade Union Congress, the All India Trade Union Congress, the Hind Mazdoor Sabha, the Center of Indian Trade Unions, the All India Trade Unions, and so on. Okay. So here, from a this is important from for prelims perspective under history. Okay, in history, you have to learn about trade unions and their origins, right? So there were many trade unions which were formed before the independences. So you have to identify those trade unions here. You have to see their formation here, and who are the major leaders who are involved in the formation of this trade unions. Okay, these things you have to be prepared for the from the prelims perspective. So these trade unions send the representation to ILO after Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and some other states either suspended a large number of labor laws for 2 3 years or diluted them in an attempt to woo industry in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. So here you also have to learn about ILO from the prelims perspective. What is ILO? ILO is International Labor Organization. It is a United Nations specialized agency, and it is the oldest specialized agency of the United Nations, which was formed in 1919 along with the League of Nations, right? So after the First World War, League of Nations was formed. So under League of Nations, ILO was also formed, and when United Nations came to being in 1945, it was made a specialized organization of the United Nations. So here the formation year is 1919 and the headquarters is Geneva in Switzerland. So these facts you have to learn about ILO from the prelims perspective. So that's all about this article. Now coming to the next article, Uttar Pradesh released skill map of workers. So this is a very good step taken by the Uttar Pradesh government to give employment to the migrant workers returning to the state. So what is this idea about? The Uttar Pradesh government on Monday released its first skill map of migrant workers who returned to the state during the lockdown. So this skill map, it is a new concept, right? So it is a new concept in India. So other states can also emulate this. So what is the skill map? The government said it will provide them employment in the state as per their skills and experience and will constitute a migrant commission for this purpose. So there will be a migrant commission who will be preparing this skill maps, right? And the people will be given employment based on their skills. So far 23 to 24 lakh migrant workers have returned to Uttar Pradesh, and the largest set of workers belong to the construction sector with over 1.52 lakh workers, right? Also the list also include other workers like carpenters, drivers, electricians, and person associated with electronic security guards, furniture and fitting workers, auto repair mechanics and all, right? Also there is a plan to expand this list. So the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has told that, see, 12,100 migrant workers were linked to the garment and tailoring sector, right? So if garment hubs can be built in Bangladesh and Vietnam, then why not here in Uttar Pradesh? So this is a very visionary step by the Chief Minister of the Uttar Pradesh in order to accommodate the migrant workers who are returning from uh, various states, right? So this step has to be emulated. It has to be copied by other states also where large amount of migrant workers are coming. So coming to the next article related to international relations, China warns US of retaliation if punished for Hong Kong law. So this Hong Kong has become another issue between US and China after this COVID-19 pandemic. So China on Monday threatened countermeasures against the US if it was punished for plans to impose a sedition law on Hong Kong that the business hub security chief hailed as a new tool that would defeat terrorism. So China plans to pass a new security law for Hong Kong. It bans treason, subversion, sedition after months of massive, often violent pro-democracy protests last year. So many pro-democracy protests are happening in Hong Kong, and China wants to suppress it. So they are planning to bring a new law. So that is the crux of this. Also, now US is trying to involve in this because Washington National Security Advisor warned that the new law would cost the city its preferential US trading status. So Hong Kong has this preferential status for trade with the US, right? So if China brings in this law, the US is threatening that the special status will be taken away from Hong Kong. But China's foreign minister said the Beijing would react to any such sanctions from the Washington. So Hong Kong has become the latest flashpoint in the soaring tensions between the world's two superpowers, which China has likened to the brink of a new Cold War. Okay. Now, the protesters in Hong Kong who have hit the streets in their millions say they are motivated by years of Beijing chipping away that city's freedom since it was handed back to China by Britain in 1997. So Hong Kong was actually a British controlled territory till 1997, and in 1997 it was handed over to China. So Hong Kong enjoys many liberties unseen on the mainland. We all know that China has a lot of restrictions on their people, but Hong Kong has comparatively more liberties, such as it has its own legal system and trade status and all, right? So campaigns view the security proposal as the most brazen move yet by the Beijing to end free speech in the city's ability to make its own laws. Of particular concern is a provision allowing Chinese security agents to operate in Hong Kong. So these are the issues which are being inherent in the new plans of legislature by the China. Coming to the next news article under international relations again, Afghan government frees 100 Taliban prisoners. So here what happened is the Afghan government has released 100 Taliban prisoners in exchange for the 3-day truce ceasefire agreed by the Taliban. So as you all know, Eid ul-Fitr festival was happening. So the Taliban has agreed for a 3-day ceasefire. So in return for this, Afghanistan government has released 100 prisoners of Taliban, and the government has also agreed that they'll be releasing around 2000 Taliban prisoners in the coming days. The President Ashraf Ghani said his administration was also ready to hold peace talks with Taliban, seen as the key to ending the war in the impoverished country. So, as you all know, United States is withdrawing from uh, Afghanistan, and the US had a peace deal with Taliban. So, under this peace deal, there was an agreement for prisoner swap that the Afghanistan government will be releasing 5,000 Taliban prisoners, and the Taliban will also be releasing the prisoners held by them, right? The security forces held by them. So this prisoner swap has started as of now. Like government has agreed to release 2000 prisoners. Anyway, the Taliban insisted that the Kabul must release all the 5000 members as agreed in the deal with the US. So that is all about this article. Now, crude processing sees biggest drop since 2003. India's crude oil processing in April slumped by 28.8% from an year earlier, its biggest drop since at least 2003, as a nationwide lockdown weighed on fuel demands and forced refiners to cut production. So, the lockdown and the travel curbs aimed at stemming a spread of COVID-19 since March 25th, it forced people to stay home, thereby cutting India's fuel demand by 45.8% in April. So the refiners struggling to store oil and products had to sell some oil to the central government, which used it to fill the strategic storage. So this strategic storage is very important from the prelims perspective. I'll be discussing it now. So relaxed rules in areas with lower number of cases have led to some recovery in the fuel demand, and refiner runs this month, right? So that is all about the news. And coming to the prelims related fact, that is strategic storage. So there is an organization called International Energy Agency. It is an organization which advises the governments on its energy needs, right? So the International Energy Agency had told that for every country should have around 90 days of its uh, crude oil requirement as its strategic storage. That is, every government should store around 90 days of crude oil as a strategic storage in case of any emergencies. Now, in order to achieve the target, India also have some underground crude oil storage. So where are these underground crude oil storage located? They are located on the eastern and western coast of the India, right? So in the western coast, they are located at two locations. One is in Mangalore and one is in Padur. Padur is in Udupi in Karnataka, and Mangalore is also in Karnataka. And coming to the eastern coast, the strategic oil oil reserves are stored in Vishakhapatnam. So these three are the existing strategic petroleum reserves in India. Now the government is also planning to start a new strategic petroleum reserve, and that is in Chandikol in Odisha. So that is the new proposed strategic reserve, which is not active as of now, but they are building it as of now. Okay. And this strategic reserves are maintained by a company. The company is called Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserve Limited. So this ISPRL, this company manages the strategic reserves in India. Doesn't have 90 days of storage, but it comes to around the storage in the refineries added up with this, it comes to around 87 days of storage which India is having, which is almost near to the 90 days storage of strategic petroleum reserves. So this strategic petroleum resource will be reading for the prelims perspective. Okay. Coming to the other articles, a well-balanced stimulus package, page 7. So this is an article by the Niti Aayog member which supports the financial package. So you can, if you read this, you can see both sides of the arguments. We have already seen a criticism of the economic package. Here you can see a support to the stimulus package. And coming to the other article, China to repatriate stranded Indians, national. It is in page 10. So as India has started its Vande Bharat mission and Samudra Setu mission to bring back stranded Indians from other countries, China also have just started its mission to repatriate stranded nationals to its country. Okay, so that is all about the other articles also. So I hope you like the video. If you like the video, please press the like button, subscribe to the channel and share the video with your friends. Have a great day. Thank you.